I'm Rebecca Reed from Line Upon Line Learning, and today I'm going to share some great books about lights and circuits. The story frame for the Light It Up project is to create a decoration or some kind of a situation or a scene that uses lights to complete it. And we light those lights by creating a circuit. So I once did this project around Christmas time. And so the first book I have to mention is a Christmas theme. Many people decorate with lights around Christmas, so that's why I began with that. However, it can work with any scene, and I've also done this other times of the year with different assignments for scenes or projects or decorations. So first I'm going to share some stories with narratives, and they're about lights and lighting up lights. And then I have some great books about circuits that can help you learn what circuits are and teach those concepts. Okay, first I have some narrative books about lights. The first book is called The Night the Lights Went Out on Christmas, and it's by Ellis Paul, illustrated by Scott Brundage. A neighborhood of families has a contest every year to decorate their neighborhood with Christmas lights. And each year the displays get larger and larger. One year, however, the surge from the holiday lights causes all the world's power to go out, all of it. And then the stars are visible in the night sky and give their own light show. And all over the town and elsewhere in the world, they can see the lights. So this story is pretty formulaic, and as a result, it's pretty predictable. But there's a nice rhyming text to it, and that gives a good foundation for talking about making your own light decorations or display. You could use Rudolph's nose, or you could even decorate sparkling stars, like in the end of this book. Skywatcher by Jamie Hogan. So in a similar vein, in Skywatcher, a young boy loves astronomy, but he lives in a city with lots of light pollution. He longs to see the stars properly, and so one day, his mother takes him to the countryside to do that. And they see familiar constellations in the sky, and they can delight in seeing the Milky Way for the first time. Older children might relate to the story even better because it has a non-rhyming tone to it, and it has a little bit of a more mature feel to the text and to the illustrations. There's a nice balance of text to the lovely and soft illustrations, and so I think it works well for an introduction to designing your own cityscape with lights or your own camping scene with lights. The next book, Courage Like Kate, The True Story of a Girl Lighthouse Keeper, is by Anna Crowley Redding and Emily Sutton. So this is based on a true story. In order to help her father, Kate takes care of the lighthouse for him in the middle 1800s. The illustrations are created with watercolor, ink, pencil, and pastels, and this variety of mediums provides nice child-friendly illustrations. The illustrations show the dangers and the difficulties accompanying her task, even as a young girl. We see the treachery of a 30-foot bridge across the roiling waves, and we see a devastating glance at the stairs going up to the lighthouse, which is very long. And we know that she must climb this circular stairwell to get up to the lighthouse. So, like I said, it's based on the true story of Kate Moore, who is the first female lighthouse keeper. Although her lighthouse did not run with electricity, it still has a nice introductory feel to lighting it up. And we could use this for making a scene, whether it's a lighthouse or some other scene that needs light to be complete. Nonfiction books about electricity and circuits. The first one I found is called Oscar and the Bird, a book about electricity by Jeff Waring. Oscar and the Bird has a general, easy tone that makes difficult science concepts easy to learn and easy to approach for young children. In this story, Oscar the cat accidentally turns on windshield wipers of a tractor, and then a bird explains to him why the windshield wipers are moving and how they'll stop again. So it begins by covering topics such as switches, and it leads into batteries, and then even complete and incomplete circuits. It mentions power stations, lightning, and windmills as other sources of electricity, but it's all at a kid-appropriate level, in fact, an early elementary child level. The last 2 pages share some more thoughts to consider about electricity, and then a very brief index. This is a great introductory nonfiction text for young readers. Which Switch is Which? A First Look at Electricity by Sam Goodwin. In this fun book, 3 mice and a moth explore a kitchen counter at night. The story is told with a simple line of text at the top of the page, and then also speech bubbles coming from the mice and the moth. As they're exploring, the creatures flip switches in order to get light, and they talk about the power of electricity to warm, cool, and move things. It's a basic book in mentioning that electricity comes from power stations by flowing through wires, that switches turn things on and off, and that plugs connect electrical devices to the power in the house. Safety tips come from the moth and also follow in the end matter, which also reminds the young reader of basic concepts touched on in the text. Kind of like a summary for the whole book. It's a very basic text that isn't going to teach a lot about circuits, but it does have this nice introductory feel, and it's fun to read with the speech bubbles. My Light by Molly Bang is narrated by the sun, and it covers many topics in elementary science. The influence of the sun is tied together with the power of the water cycle, generating electricity, photosynthesis, carbon-based energy like coal, and then back to electricity in our homes. All of this electricity has its roots in the sun's energy. Bang's illustrations illustrate the energy from the sun with tiny golden dots throughout all the pictures, so it nicely ties all the concepts together and emphasizes that it all comes from the sun. It has great illustrations and a highly readable text. I love Molly Bang's books, and My Light does not disappoint. Glowing with Electricity, Science Adventures with Glenda the Origami Fly by Thomas Kingsley Trope, illustrated by Jamie Kristoff. As the subtitle suggests, an origami firefly narrates this story. Glenda the origami firefly is hanging outside of a home, and she teaches the real fireflies why and how that backdoor lamp is glowing. Glenda introduces the concept of electricity at the atomic level, and she teaches of power plants, the fact that switches break a circuit so electricity will no longer reach the lamp. Sidebars also explain more, and the end matter provides a glossary, instructions for making your own origami firefly, and an index to this nonfiction book with a very unique take. Wired by Anastasia Suen, illustrated by Paul Carrick. Wired provides 2 levels of text. First, there's a rhythmic poetry that provides just a few words on each page to give a gentle poem about electricity going from a power station to a home. It's for very young readers, and it has a nice rhythm and a nice rhyme to it. The other text is very detailed on how electricity works, including details about electrons, power plants, generators, transformers, substations, fuse boxes, and more. The detailed illustrations, it indicates it's acrylic mixed media. The illustrations illustrate the more detailed paragraphs that are in the text. So there's a lot of complex details. So the paragraphs are most likely too much for a group to read aloud in a read-aloud setting. But you might consider reading the rhythmic text to a group, and if the students are old enough, returning to the beginning of the book to discuss the illustrations, summarize some of the concepts from the detailed text after you have read it yourself and are familiar enough to summarize the concepts and identify the items in the pictures. At the end, there are power safety tips, web references for more information, and a glossary that has indexing pages. Electricity, Bulbs, Batteries, and Sparks by Darlene Still, illustrated by Cherie Boyd. With a subtle conversational tone, Stile's book throughout suggests trying experiments such as flicking switches or rubbing socks on the floor by asking questions such as, have you ever? The facts in the book include mentioning of lightning, static, currents, conductors, closing and opening a gap on a circuit with switches, power plants and their sources of electricity, and even electricity in your body. It's all at a somewhat superficial level, but it's very much a child-friendly level. The end matter provides safety tips and, again, an index. Flick a Switch, How Electricity Gets to Your Home by Barbara Suling, illustrated by Nancy Tobin. Throughout this book, a girl and her dog comment on what they see and learn. Flick a Switch explains basic facts about switches and static electricity, Michael Faraday's discovery of the role of magnets in electricity, Ben Franklin's dangerous experiment with lightning, Thomas Edison's first power station, and Alessandro Volta's batteries are also mentioned. The second half of the book seems more in depth, with a diagram of the electricity supply from a power plant to home and explanations of each step along the way. The electric current in a home then circles back to discussion of switches, which is where the text began. 3 basic experiments with balloons and flashlights follow the text, and occasional fact sidebars are sprinkled throughout the book. The Invention Hunters discover how electricity works by Corwin Briggs. With a comic book feel to the illustrations, Invention Hunters hilariously tells the story of discoverers who suddenly appear in a girl's backyard and storm into the house hoping to find new inventions. As these discoverers try to find and guess the purpose of unknown items, the kid explainer in the pictures clarifies the items they found and explain their functions. So the child explainer teaches that a lamp is run by electricity and gives a little bit of the history of how it was discovered. She teaches about a battery and other power sources and how they move electrons at an atomic level. She teaches how a toaster uses electricity to make things hot and how magnets even can generate electricity. A disclaimer at the end points out that the Invention Hunters are never correct, but the child explainer always is correct. It's really a funny book, and I highly recommend this if you want something with a bit of humor. Like I said, it's a comic book feel with the text bubbles, but there's lots of informational text coming from that kid explainer. There are also a number of other circuit and electricity books to find, which are more traditional nonfiction, and these books provide illustrations of various items and circuits and electricity to help teach. Like I said, they're more of a traditional feel, and I'll just mention them briefly. I found Electricity All Around by Barbara Alpert and Gail Saunders Smith. It's from the Science Builders series. As an early reader, this book provides basic text with just a few sentences on each page and photographs to support what the text is teaching. It covers the basics of electricity, such as electrons and wires, sources of energy at power plants, and using electricity with switches and batteries. And a glossary and index make this a nice early reader text right at the correct level for early readers. Making a Circuit by Chris Oxlade is from the It's Electric series from Capstone. This short picture book with photographs explains both series and parallel circuits. It provides details on switches and other components in a battery circuit. It illustrates circuit diagrams and mentions electricity safety, among other things. What is a Circuit by Ethan Weingarten from the Electrified series from Gareth Stevens Press. Weingarten provides similar details to the Oxlade's book I just mentioned, and it has a higher reading level though. It has more explanations, including teaching about a short circuit, resistors, and transistors as well. Lots of information in those books. I hope these books help you as you plan a story time about lighting things up, about circuits and how they work, and about the basics of electricity. I'll see you later. This is Rebecca from Line Upon Line Learning.